iHeartRadio Music Awards 2026. Host, performers, and everything to know. What if the chaos you're seeing right now in America isn't chaos at all? What if the airport delays, the warnings of a dire situation, the sudden surge of global events, even something as seemingly unrelated as a massive music awards show, are all unfolding in a very specific sequence? Not random, not accidental, but timed. Because when systems start to strain at the exact moment the world is about to arrive on your doorstep, you have to ask yourself, is this mismanagement or is this leverage? Let me walk you through this. As of March 25th, 2026, a senior U.S. administration official issued a warning that should have set off alarms globally. American airports, they said, are facing a dire situation ahead of the 2026 FIFA World Cup. Now, pause for a second and think about the timing. The World Cup is not just a sports event. It is one of the largest logistical operations on the planet, expected to bring in millions of international travelers, billions in economic activity, and intense global attention. And yet, just weeks before peak preparation phases begin, the United States is signaling that its airport infrastructure may not be ready. Here's where it gets interesting. The warning isn't vague. It's tied to very specific problems: staffing shortages at TSA checkpoints, outdated screening infrastructure, and increasing security pressure linked to global instability. Passenger volume is projected to exceed pre-2020 levels by nearly 18% this summer, while staffing levels are still lagging by an estimated 12 to 15%. That gap isn't small. That gap is systemic. But it gets worse. The warning comes at a time when the United States is already dealing with rising geopolitical tension, particularly in the Middle East. Military assets are stretched, intelligence resources are being redirected, and homeland security priorities are shifting. When you overlay that with a global event like the World Cup, what you're really looking at is a pressure test of national capacity. Now, let's connect the dots. Why would this warning be made public now? Why signal weakness before a global event? Because in geopolitics, signaling is rarely accidental. By putting this information out, the administration is doing two things simultaneously. First, it's preparing the domestic audience for potential disruption. Long lines, delays, even travel restrictions. But second, and more importantly, it's sending a message internationally. The system is under strain. Think about who benefits from that narrative. Airlines have already begun adjusting pricing models, with projected ticket prices increasing by up to 22% for international routes into major U.S. cities. Airport contractors and private security firms are seeing stock movements upward, some rising between 8 and 12% in just days following the announcement. Crisis, or the perception of crisis, creates opportunity. Now shift your focus slightly. On the surface, it might seem unrelated, but on the same timeline, the iHeartRadio Music Awards 2026 are taking place in Los Angeles. A massive entertainment event. Global viewership, high-profile celebrities, millions of dollars in sponsorships. But here's the part most people miss. Events like this are not just cultural moments, they are economic signals. They show stability, normalcy, and global influence. So on one hand, you have warnings of systemic strain at airports. On the other, you have a carefully orchestrated display of American cultural dominance. That contrast is not accidental. It's strategic balance, controlled instability paired with visible strength. Let me explain why that matters. When a country is negotiating its position globally, especially heading into a high-stakes period like the second half of 2026, perception is everything. The U.S. is currently navigating multiple layers of pressure. Trade negotiations with China are expected to reopen in late June. Energy markets are fluctuating due to Middle East tensions, with oil prices hovering between $82 and $90 per barrel. And domestically, political positioning is already shifting ahead of the next election cycle. Now think about the leverage. If the United States can demonstrate that it controls access, that it can manage or restrict the flow of global movement through its infrastructure, that becomes a negotiating tool. It's not just about airports anymore. It's about who gets in, how quickly, and under what conditions. But here's where it gets even more complex. The World Cup isn't just happening in isolation. It's being co-hosted across North America, involving Canada and Mexico. That means coordination, shared security protocols, and cross-border movement. If U.S. airports become bottlenecks, the pressure shifts to neighboring countries. Suddenly, Canada's and Mexico's infrastructure becomes part of the equation. That redistributes economic activity, but it also redistributes control. Now, let's bring this back to Trump-era influence and current political strategy. The language being used in these warnings echoes a broader narrative that has been building for years. America first, secure the borders, control the flow. Whether you agree with that approach or not, the strategic consistency is clear. Infrastructure stress becomes justification for tighter control. Tighter control becomes leverage. Meanwhile, the entertainment industry continues to project confidence. The iHeartRadio event features top global artists, massive sponsorship deals estimated to exceed $120 million, and a digital reach that spans over 150 countries. This is soft power in action. While physical systems show strain, cultural systems project dominance. Think about that contrast. Hard infrastructure under pressure, soft influence expanding globally. Now, let's talk about the financial layer, because this is where things get very real. Travel and tourism contribute roughly $2.1 trillion annually to the U.S. economy. A disruption during a peak global event could shift billions in revenue. But not all losses are equal. Some sectors lose, others gain. Private aviation, for example, is expected to see a surge of up to 30% among high-net-worth individuals trying to bypass commercial delays. Luxury travel services, premium security packages, expedited processing systems, all of these become high-demand commodities. And then there's the political timing. The warning comes in late March. The World Cup preparation intensifies through April and May. By June, the system will either prove resilient or confirm the fears. That timeline overlaps almost perfectly with anticipated diplomatic engagements, including potential U.S.-China trade discussions and NATO strategic reviews. So the question becomes, is this a coincidence? Or is the strain itself part of the negotiation environment? Because if global partners see that the U.S. is operating at capacity, they may adjust their expectations. They may offer concessions. They may push for alternative arrangements. And in that space, leverage shifts. Let me say this clearly. Weakness, when controlled and communicated effectively, can become a form of power. Now, if you're watching this and trying to make sense of it all, this is exactly why platforms like ANC News exist. To break down not just what's happening, but why it's happening, and what it means for the next move on the global chessboard. But it doesn't stop here. There's another layer most people aren't paying attention to: security risk. Large-scale events like the World Cup and globally televised award shows increase the threat profile significantly. Intelligence agencies are already reallocating resources. That puts additional pressure on airport operations, which are already stretched thin. And here's the part that should really make you think. If an incident were to occur, even a minor one, the justification for sweeping policy changes would be immediate. Expanded surveillance, stricter entry requirements, increased federal control over transportation hubs. All of it could happen within weeks. Now, fast forward 3 to 6 months. If the current trajectory continues, we could see a very different landscape by late 2026. More centralized control over travel infrastructure, increased reliance on private sector partnerships, and a shift in how global movement is regulated, not just in the US, but across allied nations. At the same time, cultural influence continues to expand. Events like the iHeartRadio Music Awards reinforce America's position as a global entertainment hub. That soft power translates into economic influence, brand dominance, and even political goodwill in certain regions. So you have two parallel strategies unfolding. One restricts and controls. The other expands and attracts. Together, they create a system of managed tension. Now here's the big strategic question. Is the United States preparing for a period of contraction, tightening its systems to maintain control? Or is it setting the stage for a larger expansion, using temporary strain to justify long-term restructuring? Because the answer to that question will define not just the next few months, but the next phase of global power alignment. And as we move closer to key deadlines, World Cup kickoff phases, trade negotiations, election positioning, every signal becomes more important. Every announcement carries weight. Every delay, every event, every warning. It all feeds into a much larger narrative. Now, here's where it gets even deeper. Financial markets are not just reacting, they are positioning. Hedge funds, institutional investors, and global asset managers are already shifting capital into sectors that benefit from volatility. Defense stocks have seen incremental rises of 5 to 9% over the past 2 weeks. Travel insurance companies are quietly increasing premiums. Logistics firms are expanding capacity in secondary hubs outside major U.S. cities. Think about that. Money is moving before the crisis fully materializes. And when money moves early, it usually means one thing. Someone expects the pressure to increase, not decrease. Now connect this to energy markets again. If Middle East tensions continue and oil pushes past $95 per barrel, travel costs surge. Airlines pass those costs to consumers. Fewer people travel, but those who do pay significantly more. That creates a two-tier system of mobility. Limited access becomes a form of control. And control, in geopolitical terms, is power. At the same time, digital influence is scaling aggressively. The iHeartRadio Music Awards are not just being broadcast, they are being streamed, clipped, and redistributed across platforms in real time. This expands American cultural reach without relying on physical movement. In other words, even if travel slows down, influence does not. That's a strategic advantage most countries don't have. Now ask yourself this. If the US can maintain global influence digitally while tightening physical access, what does that do to its negotiating position? It strengthens it, because it reduces dependency while maintaining dominance. And this is exactly the kind of layered strategy that defines modern power competition. It's not just military, it's not just economic, it's infrastructural, cultural, digital, and psychological all at once. Now, as we approach late April and early May, watch for key signals. Watch for policy adjustments at major U.S. airports. Watch for new security directives. Watch for airline pricing shifts. And, most importantly, watch for how other countries respond. Do they align, or do they start building alternatives? Because that response will tell you everything about where the next phase is heading. And if you're serious about understanding these deeper layers, make sure you stay locked in with ANC News, because this is where surface-level headlines turn into strategic insight. Because what we're witnessing right now is not a random series of events. It's a system under calculated pressure. A system being tested, adjusted, and possibly restructured in real time. And the biggest moves haven't even happened yet. The geopolitical chess match is already in motion. The pieces are being positioned, alliances are being tested, and pressure points are being exposed. And if history has taught us anything, it's that moments like these don't resolve quietly. They escalate, they transform, and they redefine power. And this is just the beginning. ANC News will continue tracking every development.